It is the Resistance Report for May 25th, 2017. Good evening. As you know, in the Resistance Report, what we try to do is not just deliver news every day. You can get the news every day wherever you go. What we're trying to do is give you context, theme, connect the dots, enable you to see how different pieces of what is happening relate to one another. The theme today is hypocrisy. Now, I know what you're thinking. It could be the theme any day in the era of Donald Trump. But there's a particular amount of hypocrisy today that needs to be discussed. I mean, first of all, number one, Donald Trump came to office with a promise that he was going to create jobs for working class people. He was going to be the champion of the working class. He was going to create better jobs. But here's what he has done, and this is where the hypocrisy comes in. Basically, the biggest thing he has done with regard to jobs is required, or he wants to require, this is his budget, he wants to require that people who are getting food stamps or Social Security disability or Medicaid, and this includes a lot of Trump voters, they must get a job as a prerequisite to getting any of these benefits. That's the jobs program. That's the only jobs program. Now, you see the irony there and the hypocrisy there, because in order to make that a jobs program, you have to have jobs for these people to get. And it's very difficult for a lot of these people to get jobs because they're disabled, or they have fallen on bad luck, or they have unhealthy, their health is gone. So you see that this is an anti-jobs program. This is not a jobs program. Now, Donald Trump has said that's not fair. I mean, what Donald Trump says he's doing is going to corporations and saying, you have got to create jobs in America, and I, Donald Trump, I'm going to give you a tax cut and also repeal regulations so you make more money so you can afford to make more jobs in the United States. And he points to Carrier air conditioning, for example, as one of his great success stories. Well, it's not such a success story. You remember last spring when Trump declared to an Indianapolis crowd that he would stop Carrier from uprooting in search of cheaper labor. This is what he said. Here's what's going to happen. You have to think of Trump's accent here, Trump's presentation. Here's what's going to happen. They're going to call me. They're going to say, Mr. President, Carrier has decided to stay in Indiana, 100%. It's not like we have an 80% chance of keeping them or a 95%, 100%. That's what he said to the cheering crowd. And then after the election, you remember he took credit for rescuing Carrier jobs, tweeting on Thanksgiving that he had called the company's leadership to cut a deal. What a fabulous deal, he said. A celebratory. Trump visited the factory in December. After the election, he announced that thanks to his negotiating ability, his art of the deal, his fabulous ability to make deals, more than 1,100 Carrier jobs would stay in the heartland. And he said those jobs, the numbers would go even higher, noting that Carrier had agreed to invest roughly $16 million in updating the plant. And he said, and by the way, that number is going to go up substantially as they expand this area, this plant. That 1,100 is going to be a minimum number. Well, Carrier has now informed the state of Indiana that it will soon begin cutting 632 jobs from its Indianapolis factory, and it will continue to slash jobs until only a total of 800 at most remain. It's moving jobs to Monterrey, Mexico, where the minimum wage is $3.90 an hour, and it is also automating other jobs. That $16 million that Trump talked about, that was used to create automated and buy automated equipment, robots and others that will take the jobs and displace real people. The only reason Carrier is keeping any jobs in Indiana at all is the state is giving Carrier $7 million in tax credits, and if the company outsources any of the remaining jobs over the next 10 years, it will have to pay back the money. And it's probably not going to do that. So here we have another Trump hypocrisy, another Trump lie. And the question for you tonight is, when will America's blue-collar workers who voted for Donald Trump realize that they have been shafted? And you can enter your winning, hopefully, date. By what date? By what date, if ever, are they ever going to know that he is shafting them? Now, keep that in mind. I want to move on to another topic, but it is related. It is all part of the same hypocrisy. In one of the most blatant of hypocritical moves, now that is saying something in this era of Donald Trump, in the Trump administration, Trump's White House lawyers have already tried to stymie Robert Mueller. Now remember, Robert Mueller is the special counsel in the Russian investigation. The White House lawyers are claiming that Mueller needs the same type of lobbyist waiver that the White House has been trying to hide from the Government Office of Ethics for all the lobbyists that Trump has hired for his administration. Talk about hypocrisy. Trump's legal team says that because Mueller worked at a big Washington law firm named WilmerHale, it's the law firm that represents major figures in the inquiry, in the investigation, like Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, and Paul Manafort, the former campaign manager, that for that reason, they cannot be investigated, and Mueller cannot investigate them. Of course, Trump's own Justice Department disagrees with this, saying that its ethics experts have determined that Mueller's participation in matters to him, assigned to him, are completely appropriate. Now, why, I ask you, why would White House lawyers pursue such an utterly hypocritical and baseless line of attack? There they are, right now. They're on Trump's tail. Can you hear them? Well, they're trying to use, according to Richard Painter, and Richard Painter was the chief ethics lawyer in the George W. Bush White House. This is what his lesson that he draws from all of this is. They're trying to use the ethics rules to fire a special prosecutor, and that is insane. This is the George W. Bush chief ethics lawyer saying this is insane. If the Bush administration had told him to concoct legal justifications for evading ethic rules and legal inquiries in this way, said Painter, I'd have quit. So should Trump's White House lawyers. They should quit. They have some responsibility to America, right? Some responsibility to the truth. Some responsibility that goes beyond their loyalty to Trump. Why would anybody have any loyalty to Trump anyway? Example number 3 from today's news. Today, Trump had an opportunity to make amends for his absurd campaign claim that NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is obsolete. You remember that? Remember that claim? And when he questioned during the campaign why the United States was spending its own money to defend Europe, and he threatened to withdraw from NATO if other members failed to pay their fair share. That's what he said. So today, European leaders are anxiously awaiting and anticipating Trump's speech, obviously. It was at a ceremony dedicated to a memorial that was memorializing NATO's resolve in the wake of the 2001 terrorist attacks on the United States. But what did Trump say? Did he reassure NATO that those campaign bloviations were not real? No. Instead, he gave absolutely no specific commitment to NATO. Instead, he publicly chastised other European leaders for not being fair to U.S. taxpayers. He said 23 of the 28 member nations of NATO are still not paying what they should be paying and what they are supposed to be paying. They owe massive amounts from past years. I've been very, very direct about this. Now remember, this is from a man who refuses to pay his fair share of U.S. taxes, who's determined to rig the system even more so his cronies, his rich friends, don't have to pay their fair share, who has said publicly that he has a responsibility to pay as little as he possibly legally can get away with. And then what does he do before all the European leaders? He says that our biggest responsibility, we have to be focused on driving terrorists out of Europe and not letting them back in. They're all losers, he said, using his favorite term. They're all losers. Drive them out and never let them back in. Well, that's a real strategy for you, isn't it? Immediately after his speech, a very subdued set of European leaders gathered for the traditional family photograph of European leaders at the NATO summit. As they chatted among themselves, where was Donald Trump? He was off by himself. He was left alone at the podium. Donald Trump continues to be an embarrassment for you and me and the United States. And I want to deliver this message to our European friends. He doesn't represent the views of most Americans. He really, really doesn't. And we are doing everything we possibly can to get rid of him. Let me reassure you. And finally tonight, I want to just point out something. It has to do with hypocrisy. It also has to do with what Trump is doing with regard to our democracy and how his basically violating the norms of our democracy, defining deviancy downward, is affecting our politics. Yesterday evening, a reporter for the Guardian newspaper, you might have heard about this, Ben Jacobs, he asked the Republican who is running in today's special election in Montana for the House, Greg Gianforte, he asked him for his reaction to the latest news from the Congressional Budget Office that estimated that 23 million Americans would lose their health insurance because of the Republicans' bill to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And then what happened? Well, in the words of a Fox News team, now let's be clear, this is Fox News. That Fox News team was right there. They saw it. Gianforte grabbed Jacobs by the neck with both hands, slammed him into the ground behind him. Gianforte then began punching Jacobs. Gianforte moved on top of Jacobs, began yelling something to the effect of, "I'm sick and tired of this." Jacobs scrambled to his knees, said something about his glasses being broken, and according to the Fox News crew that was right there, they were just witnessing this, they say, to be clear, at no point did any of us who witnessed this assault see Jacobs show any form of physical aggression toward Gianforte, who'd left the area after giving statements to a local sheriff's deputies. Now Gianforte is a man who is a candidate for the United States House of Representatives. He beats up, he slams a reporter. In a democracy, people who represent you and represent me are supposed to talk to reporters. That is part of their accountability. That's the way we hold, part of the way we hold representatives accountable. They talk to reporters, and the reporters report back to us about what they say. He didn't like the question. So what does he do? He exercises violence on this reporter, injures him. The reporter goes to the hospital. That is bad enough. But then what does Gianforte's spokesman, a spokesman, spinner, Shane Scanlon, do? He comes up with a complete lie, a total lie about what happened, even though the Fox News people are right there. And actually the Fox News people said it was a lie. And he ends his lie, that is, Shane Scanlon ends his lie by saying it's unfortunate that this aggressive behavior from a liberal journalist, he blames the whole thing on the journalist, and he says it's unfortunate that this aggressive behavior from a liberal journalist created this scene at our campaign volunteer barbecue. So not only do you have violence against the reporter, not only do you have a big lie told, but also you have a statement that says, in effect, that the term liberal journalist, that term is offered here as an implicit excuse for the candidate's violent behavior. I mean, the none too subtle message to people reading the statement is that Gianforte didn't strike out against some guy doing his job, but against the enemy, a liberal reporter. That's what we are up against in this era of Trump. That is potentially the new normal. That's what we must fight against. Now, I don't know what's going to happen today. But if this man, Gianforte, becomes a United States representative in the House of Representatives, I don't care whether he's Republican or he's an independent or he's a Democrat or he's a libertarian. I don't care what he is. He doesn't belong there. He's somebody who does not have the temperament, the character, to represent anybody in our democracy. And the guy who works for him, who lies and conjures up this kind of liberal reporter image, he doesn't belong anywhere either. We don't need these people in public life. Sometimes I use the word shame because I don't think it's used enough. Shame on them. Now, starting tomorrow, there's another congressional recess, Memorial Day weekend congressional recess. You do me a favor. If you're not already planning to do so, find out through indivisiblegod.com. Find out where and when your representatives are showing up. And if you don't know, go to their headquarters and make it clear you don't want the Republicans' health care plan that is going to put 23 million people out of coverage under health care, lose their health care. You don't like Trump's budget that is going to be the cruelest and most unusual budget we have ever had, a deviant budget in the sense that it cuts food stamps and cuts Social Security disability and cuts all kinds of things that people need who are vulnerable in our society. And you also don't stand for the kind of violence and disrespect for the press that Donald Trump and the Republicans are now representing. And now your questions. Roger Hooper, can you please tell us who actually wrote and devised this budget? Who's the power behind the throne that worked out the details of this monstrosity? Well, Roger, it comes technically from the Office of Management and Budget. Mick Mulvaney is the head of the Office of Management and Budget. Before he became head of OMB, Trump appointed him. He was a member of Congress. He was a Tea Party member of Congress, so that's where it came from. You don't need more than that. Obviously, Pence probably agreed to that. Others around the administration, who are also right-wingers, probably agreed to it, but I think Mulvaney is the prime mover. Anna Fuchs, which rich and influential Americans have a vested interest in keeping Trump in office? Anna, unfortunately, there are a lot of rich and influential people who want a big tax cut. They want to get rid of the estate tax. They don't want to pay even the taxes that they are paying, even though their tax rates are lower and the amount of taxes they are paying in total, I'm talking about federal income taxes, Social Security, state, local taxes, everything, lower than they have been in years. They want to get rid of all of those taxes. They want to make as much as possible, and they like Trump. Not all of them, but many of them who supported Trump. Kimberly Burnett, how is impeachment a better option than riding out 4 years of avoiding Pence as the President of the United States? Well, Kimberly, look, I think it is better and safer for our republic to have a right-winger as president, honestly, than having a sociopath, because Donald Trump is unhinged. I don't personally want an unhinged president. He's also modeling the kind of behavior that is not only narcissistic, but also is very damaging to democratic institutions. Tracy DeSweat, Sweet or Sweat? How do we ensure Pence and Ryan are held accountable as well? Well, Tracy, the only thing we really have with regard to Paul Ryan is the ballot box, and that comes down to 2018, flipping the House, making sure that Paul Ryan is no longer the Speaker of the House. And you can do that, and I hope you are already working with others to make sure that in your district and also in sister districts, and here I want to bring your attention again to swingleft.org, where you can find a district near you that's a purple district, where you can help them if you're already in a blue district. It's up to us. In terms of Pence, how do we get rid of Pence? Well, one way we get rid of Pence is we impeach Trump, and then in 2020 we make sure that Pence is no longer president. Dorothy Kokolin, is that right, Dorothy? As an elementary school teacher, I feel powerless to truly inspire my students in ways that can ultimately lift them out of poverty. Do you have any advice for us teachers who are on the front lines of trying to help end some of our nation's biggest problems? First of all, Dorothy, my appreciation and heart go out to you and to other teachers on the front line. I mean, you are the ones who are seeing the face of poverty in our children, our nation's children. 1 out of 5 of our nation's children is in poverty. And many of them are clustered together in poor areas, in poor schools, and we expect our teachers to do everything. And you know as well as I do that a poor kid who has not eaten well or has not eaten maybe dinner and comes to school hungry and can't see because he needs glasses or she needs glasses, and also has a toothache because they haven't seen a dentist, they can't learn. And you are trying to struggle with those kids. Well, so I used the term shame before. I want to use the term honor right now because I and other Americans honor you and other teachers who are trying to do your job. Kay Garrett, a request. Please make it clear again that we're not just fighting Trump, but the Republican agenda. Kay, let me just say this again. We are not just fighting Trump. We are fighting a vicious Republican agenda, and it's not even adequate to fight the vicious Republican agenda. We also have got to stand for a progressive agenda. We've got to stand for getting big money out of politics, having a single-payer health care plan. We've got to stand for getting good jobs, raising the minimum wage, having an earned income tax credit that is a wage subsidy that lifts everybody out of poverty who is working. We have got to stand for a country that is really advances social justice in all its dimensions. Demilitarize the police. Get people out of jail for nonviolent criminals. Just the opposite of what Jeff Sessions and others want. Ken Johnson, of the 30 OECD countries, that's Office of Economic Cooperation and Development, that are not the United States, half of them have single-payer health systems, and the others use private or hybrid private-public insurance. But they all have much lower per capita health care costs than the United States. They all have universal health care, and on average enjoy better health than we do. What accounts for the lower health care costs, and why can't we just do whatever they are doing? Well, Ken, that is a great question. The answer is ideology. We pay more for health care than any other nation on earth. We're paying about 20% of our entire economy very soon. It's 19% technically. It's going to be 20% very soon. And we have the worst health care outcomes of any country. And then you ask yourself why? It's because we are entirely based on a private for-profit insurance system that is designed to avoid sick people. Okay, 3 big questions. Ryan Terror. Why do we need politicians? Why don't we vote for issues and not people? What's the argument for capitalism being better than socialism or communism? Well, wait a minute, Ryan. There are a lot of questions involved here. First of all, we're not going to vote on issues only. I mean, can you imagine? You have 210 million American adults who are going to sit at their computer and are going to vote on issues one by one. No, that's not a representative democracy. We and our founding fathers designed a republic, a representative democracy, not a direct democracy, a representative democracy. We rely on people who should be spending their time getting to be experts on various issues that affect us, deliberating, helping us understand the truth. That's what a democracy is all about. It's not just pushing buttons and voting on stuff we have no idea about. And what's the argument for capitalism being better than socialism or communism? Well, these isms don't make any sense anyway. I mean, look, even going to China, so-called communist China, it's still increasingly private property and free exchange of goods and services, and that's called capitalism. There is no communism any longer around the world. Let's just not have an ism discussion. Let's talk about the kind of system we want. We want a system that is not a brutal capitalist system like in the United States. Brian Christian III, how do national anxiety levels now compare to the Nixon years? Brian, it is a very good question, and I'm an expert, because I'm old enough to remember the Nixon years. In fact, I was talking to somebody recently about the year 1968. Now, I don't know whether you're old enough to remember 1968. How many of you watching right now? Put up your hands. Are you old enough to remember 1968? All right, about 3,200 of you are. Well, that's pretty good. That's more than I would have expected. Here's the thing about 1968. This is when Nixon became president. I was then a senior in college. I was anti-war. I was organizing states for Eugene McCarthy. Do you remember Eugene McCarthy? Keep clean for Gene. I didn't have a beard. I shaved my hair. I looked very clean-cut. Went around, organized states for Gene McCarthy. But here's the thing. This was a terrible time in American history. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Our cities were burning down. The Vietnam War was getting worse. I lost a very good friend who was shot down over Vietnam. And then Robert F. Kennedy, the person who I had interned for in the Senate, he was assassinated. And the war kept accelerating. And then Richard Nixon was elected president. And I passed through Chicago during that convention, and there was almost a civil war right there in the Democratic Party. Tear gas. Anybody who thinks that right now we have reached the bottom doesn't remember how awful 1968 was. We did bounce back somewhat. Craig Edwards, last question. How will progressives begin to control and project a working plan that's fully fleshed out and ready to roll? Craig, progressives won't have a working plan that is fully fleshed out and ready to roll before 2020, but I think it is our responsibility, and I take part of that responsibility, to make sure that there are very good ideas that are sufficiently fleshed out, that they can be explained clearly to people, people can get behind them, people can understand why they are important. I mean, take a single-payer plan, for example. A lot of Americans still hear single-payer plan or Medicare for all, and they say, oh, socialized medicine. Well, they need to be able to understand that that is the most efficient way of delivering health care and getting good results, and not simply spending our money on executive salaries and advertising and marketing of private for-profit healthcare plans and rewarding shareholders of private for-profit healthcare plans. I mean, there are ways of building a constituency and building a progressive base between now and 2020, certainly, that have a lot to do with public education. which quite frankly is why I do what I am doing in my own little tiny way, why we are engaged in the Resistance Report, because it really is about spreading the truth. At a time in our nation's history when big lies are the currency of Donald Trump and many, many Republicans, and maybe a few Democrats, spreading the truth, understanding the truth, helping other people to understand the truth, is the essence of our democracy, and it is the only way we really build the kind of progressive movement we need. This ends tonight's Resistance Report. Thank you for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.